Hey, what's up, everyone? So my post now today is basically a little bit of Black history and a lot of what we are not taught today as a society. Nevertheless, in 1904, there was a particular town, and I'm going to leave out some of the details. But this particular town, if I Google it, which I did, just in a Wikipedia sort of sense, it tells you that there was a great fire in 1904, and the town business district burned to the ground, and the town rebuilt and prospered. But here's the part they don't tell you: that one of the families there that was very affluent and wealthy due to the cotton boom and use of slaves and whatnot, had a younger member of this white family who he was playing dice one night with some of the black members of the town where he was shot. After the shooting, there was a manhunt, and many of the black youths that were at the dice game, just fled the scene. But one man that was in the area was rounded up, and with no real proof that he was at any part of the dice game or the shooting, he was taken to jail. That evening, members of the young man's family, the white man's family, went to the jailhouse, and with the help of the constable, who was reluctant to resist their advances, they actually went into the jailhouse, went into the man's cell, extracted him, and then beat him severely. I don't think to death, from what I understand. But then he was lit on fire, where they all walked out of the jailhouse to the cheers of the local townspeople. Well, the fire spread up the wall, up to the second floor of the jailhouse. And from there, the report is that winds kicked in and blew over to the feed store, then to the wagon store, then to the bank, to the school, a few other businesses, and then on to houses within in the community. So that's where the fire came from. But that's not what you hear if you search this particular town in a lot of formats. I understand not every place or every link or every source is going to have that knowledge, but if you have the fire, then you do have the knowledge or the origin of the fire. And this is what we aren't taught in a lot of phases, in a lot of areas of not only US, but world history. And that's just what history is, his story. So I would imagine that maybe it's bad for tourism. Maybe they're trying to put that behind them, an ugly chapter in U.S. history as far as the treatment of that man. But nevertheless, it's important to know, not as a tool to hold over people's heads, but to understand what people have survived, to understand what we have as a luxury and what we should be grateful for in our society today, for all walks. That as people of color, in a lot of senses, this is not, even though we face a lot of setbacks, a lot of prejudice, a lot of active stereotyping, and just race hate, it's not nearly as bad as something like that in a lot of ways. And if you are not black or of a minority background, that you just are not raised by or exposed to that sort of inhumane behavior, or raised by monsters in a lot of cases. And I understand a lot of it is just passed on behavior, but nevertheless, we can only be grateful that people started to think better of the treatment of other human beings. So after the fire, the people, of the society realized, like, they were a little ticked off with these people who had set the fire, because they essentially burned down, this town. And I think that was the start in a lot of ways, in that particular chapter, for people to start resisting against such cruel violence, for people not like them in the society. Now, had their houses not burned down, we may be telling a different story. But it does speak to what blacks have endured, just the unjust and inhumane treatment, and where we are not shown a lot of these these events in history. So it's important to, I believe it's important to know. And again, for both sides of the coin that I mentioned before. The unfortunate part is after they burned down the town in vengeance of the young man who was shot, he died 3 weeks later of the gunshot wound to begin with, and the actual killer or the actual shooter was never caught, nor was the family who lynched that man in jail and effectively burned down the town. Nobody was charged. So there was really just a no-win all the way across the board. So just a little piece of history, just a little piece of awareness as to what we can know, what we're not taught. Guys, it's important. Get out and self-educate. Professors, universities, things like that, they're not always going to tell you. They may have an agenda, and a lot of times your best interest or your full knowledge and understanding of things is not it. And it's just a lot to learn, so there's a lot to teach. So I'm not going to say that they do these things on purpose. I understand that there are points and different places that you would choose to shift the weight of learning. But this is one of those things that I'm going to share. Hopefully it just brings something to the table that you either knew or now know. And I know I left out a lot of names, family names, and the town name, but I didn't feel that that was necessarily the important part, because that sort of happening was so regular that just to put one name to it makes it feel like it's an isolated incident, when it really happened more than we care to acknowledge as a society, and maybe we should. Guys, have a fantastic day, and again, continue to self-educate and start to talk to one another and have understandings, have real discussions, and share your knowledge. Peace, love, unity, solidarity.